Velkommen alle sammen! What are the Vikings most known for? Well, for the general public, they sailed into the village, burnt it down, took the treasure, killed the men, and took the women as slaves, or so we're told. But did the Vikings actually engage in... We're not supposed to say that word here, so from this point on I will use the Norwegian word volta or voldtekt, the noun. So why do I use the modern Norwegian word for this? Well, that's because the Old Norse language actually didn't even have a word for this act of forcing yourself sexually upon an unwilling recipient. So that just kind of gives you a glimpse of how often this may have happened and the culture's view on it, if there's not even a word to describe this act. And there have been a lot of lies told over the last 1,000 years that most of you have probably just believed, but in this video we're going over the actual sources to get an idea of what it was really like in the Viking Age and the attitude towards sexuality and women, to learn from it. I don't just make these videos for entertainment, guys. History is there to learn things, gain wisdom, things that we have forgotten, and learn things that we should not repeat from history. So first, we have a law code, the Grágás, which is one of the oldest law codes we have from the north of Europe. If a man sleeps with a free woman with permanent residence, the penalty is full outlawry. So this was the harshest punishment, full outlawry, and it was actually very illegal to have sex with a free woman against her will. And even more so, what scholars have brought to attention, it was illegal if it was against the men's will, more than anything. A man that was the lord of the estate or homestead where the woman took up residence, he was responsible for looking after that woman. So whether the woman had sex with another man willingly or unwillingly, it was the men in her life, the husband, of course, or the father or the brother or cousin, whoever. It was the men in her life who received a bulk of the shame if he did not approve of it, and he was the one responsible for dealing out justice. And this is exactly what we have the most attestations of in the sources, that sexual crimes were carried out on women in order to bring shame to the men in their lives who were supposed to be looking out for them. In Víglundar saga, brothers Einar and Jökull are jealous of their powerful neighbor Þorgils, and they wanted to tarnish his reputation. Einar finds a way to do this, and Einar actually asks his mother for advice, like, hey mom, I really want to damage Þorgils' reputation. I think I should sleep with his wife, and then he will be dishonored and he will be forced to fight me. To which his mom actually says, oh, that's a good idea, I was thinking the same thing myself. So whether he forced himself sexually upon Þorgils' wife or whether he just charmed her and she did it willingly, it's hard to tell in a lot of these cases because of the language that is used in all of these sources, but I'll speak about all that in a minute. Another source in Guðmundar saga, Chieftain Guðmund burns his rival Önund alive in his home, and then he spoke about plans of taking his daughter as his concubine and having her sleep with every horny man that wanted her. That didn't actually happen, they just spoke about it and planned it, but it shows the perception of honor and reputation. In Þorgils saga, a man named Netti fired one of his employees, Mor, but Mor does not like that, and as revenge he decides he should sleep with Netti's daughter and his wife while he was away. Again, nowhere is it specified whether the women resisted or not, but if it was any sort of sexual act that the man of the house didn't approve of, that was considered dishonorable and illegal and could be punishable. One example where a woman actually did resist is in the Haralds saga. A powerful chieftain named Jarl Sigurd, he slept with a rival Klippir's wife. Her name was Óláfs, and especially it says he laid with her against her will. That is one where we have clear records of the woman not wanting it. In Þórðar saga, a more detailed account of this story actually comes, same story, different saga, where there is a conversation after this happens between Þórðar and his brother, Klippir, who had just had his wife banged by Jarl Sigurd. And Þórðar basically was challenging his brother, like, brother, why don't you go hunt down Jarl Sigurd? He's given you the greatest dishonor by sleeping with your wife. Yeah, I know the Jarl is a lot stronger than you, but it's better to die fighting him than to live with this shame. Let's go, I'll help you, we'll both go together. And then Klippir and his brother and the other men of the family hunted Jarl Sigurd down and killed him. You see how the whole family gets involved. I think that's a beautiful thing. Although a lot of the attitude towards like sex and women back then was very bad, very unfair. I think it's a great thing that the men actually were allowed to take responsibility and deal out justice if a female in their family was assaulted. And this is one of the most despicable things about the modern legal system. If a beloved woman in any of our families is assaulted, not only are us men not allowed to go out and hunt down the guy that did it, we have to let the police and the courts do it. They take care of it, and they typically do absolutely nothing in these cases if it happens. So I think it would be beautiful if we let the men just hunt the family down of the offender. It's something that actual sexual offenders would be scared of, unlike the modern day courts where usually nothing happens. Also, this type of thing would keep the women honest too. We all know of this. There's new stories in the news every month. These false sexual assault allegations in the modern day that have turned out to be lies, used to attack celebrities or whatever, and the women who lied basically bear no consequence at all. But if it was up to the woman's men in her family to go out and hunt the guys down and enact justice and potentially die doing so, those kinds of things would keep the woman more honest, because she wouldn't want to lie and have her family members get potentially harmed chasing down a guy who didn't really do it. So it would keep honesty and honor in all parts of the thing. So that's one good thing, probably the only good thing about the ancient view about this. That being said, on to the next point. It wasn't all about men and their reputation. The woman's reputation was at stake too. In the Víglundar saga, again, a man named Einar wants to dishonor a rival named Thorgils by sleeping with his wife, and it was shame on all parts, and it especially in this source mentioned that Óláfs was said to endure the skömm, the shame from this happening. Another in Kjalnesinga saga, a man named Kulfíðir actually enacts a lengthy sexual assault on a woman named Óláfs. Her husband comes back and kills Kulfíðir, but he says that I can never love my wife again because Kulfíðir has disgraced her. And in this source, it is worth mentioning that Kulfíðir is described as extremely unmanly, young, and an honorless boy. So I don't want you to get the idea that the attackers were not shamed too in these cases. They had a shame even greater deal than the victims most of the time. There's a ton of info in Grettis saga. A powerful chieftain named Thorfinn used his influence to make the berserker brothers, the criminals Þórðir and Ögmund, he made them outlaws. And while Thorfinn was away from his homestead, the berserkers came to it with plans of assaulting the women living there, his wife, daughter, those kinds of things. They didn't do it right away, but they came in and they made the woman bring them drinks, bring me drinks, making jokes like, don't worry ladies, your beds will be warm tonight. Luckily, Grettis, the hero of the story, ended up saving the women even before any assault happened, and Grettis was actually thanked by a woman for having saved her and her daughter from the utmost shame that we could never regain honor from. Now, Grettir wasn't exactly a good guy, even though he saved these women from enduring the sexual attack and shame. But later in the story, Grettir falls asleep naked in the barn one night, and a slave girl saw him, and she went around telling everyone on the farm, like, oh, he's a big, strong man, he's really big, but his little penis was not in proportion to his body. So Grettir heard this, she was making fun of him, telling everybody, and he proceeded to grab her and have sex with her unwillingly while she screamed, and all the while Grettir was singing merrily a glorious song comparing his little stinky winky to a mighty sword. So we have the same story here. Grettir saved the woman from sexual assault, which was a chieftain's wife and daughter, and then later on in the story he actually sexually attacked a woman while singing merrily and proud about it. That was a slave, however. Social class played a huge role in whether these sexual things were accepted or not. This was the main thing of the time, so I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. Sexual crime was very illegal in the Viking Age, and you would be hunted down if you were guilty of it. I went over a few examples so far of this happening, but it was very, very rare. We almost never hear about this, and the men who forced themselves upon women were regarded as very, very shameful, so much that actually the Old Norse language actually had words to refer to men who did not treat women well, like these words you see right here. However, there were a few instances where it was acceptable to force yourself upon a woman. The first was if it was done on a slave woman. Unfortunately, this happened. In the Grágás law code, a man had the right to buy a female slave, til karnaðir it's called, for sexual intercourse. And the Norse actually, they treated their slaves relatively well compared to other cultures in history, but we have plenty of examples in the sagas of a man using his slave woman to please himself. It doesn't go into detail in most of these cases, but I doubt the woman was willing. It was not nice to be a slave. One example, though, to show the kind of perception comes in the Vatnsdaela saga. There was a man who who found a very beautiful slave woman, and he bought her, and he had sex with her against her will. He brought her back to Iceland, and actually found out later on that the slave girl was a princess of Ireland named Melkorka. And as soon as he found this out, he basically let her have a house and a plot of land on his property, and he let her live pretty free as soon as he found out that she was from a noble royal family. So social class was really everything, and this hasn't gone anywhere, by the way, guys. We still have social classes and slavery and all this discrimination and horrible treatment in the modern world right here in our modern society today. It's just ancient cultures actually recognized it and knew what to call it, whereas most of us today are brainwashed and don't even recognize slavery when we see it. So another example to make this point, in Óláfs Tryggvason saga, the beloved Jarl Håkon, the most loved man in Norway, he saved the country many times, he was a national hero, and he ended up being the most hated man because he was tricking women to sleeping with him in different ways. Like, he was promising them a marriage, he sent messages to their father to let them come stay with him, and he basically had sex with them and sent them home. Now, all kings and chieftains forced themselves upon lower class women like slaves or servants or whatever, and nobody ever had a problem with those people. They hated Håkon because he slept with all the most powerful chieftains' daughters in Norway. So slaves and low class women pretty much slept with whoever, willingly or unwillingly, since they were not expected to have any honor anyway, because they were from the lower slave class. But a high-class lady couldn't just let any guy in between her legs, willing or unwilling, because that was shameful behavior on her and the whole family. So interpret that however you want. Next, we'll have to speak about booty, we can call it, captives or spoils of war. So, contrary to popular belief, we actually have no foreign sources from anywhere in Europe that the Vikings invaded and that they engaged in any sexual assaults like you see in all these movies. Of course they did. Of course they did. Every culture at the time would have done so. They would have had their way with the women if they invaded a territory and defeated the men in battle. In fact, we actually have a few sources in skaldic poems referring to hreðu, which basically refers to the captives or loot or booty taken from war. And these are heroic songs, skaldic poems, singing about the battle and how they slept with all the women after they defeated the army. Doesn't say whether it was willing or not, but I doubt all of them were willing. This again, the harsh reality of history, but the world, exact same thing happens today and would happen again too in your society, so we don't need to act like we have the moral high ground here about this issue, because an army of horny men who just won the battle would do the same thing no matter where you are in the world today, pretty much. That's just a reality of life. What I'm saying is that the Viking world was a bit more sympathetic and protective of women than anywhere else in the world at the time. There are countless examples in the sources of men shouting to each other before they start fighting to organize the women, to get the women, children, elderly, and even slaves, get them to safety before the men start fighting. As for the after the battle, again, it would have been dependent on social class. The slaves and low-class women would have probably been used as the men pleased, but if you were a high-class or noble woman or royalty, even enemy Viking armies would have recognized your social status, and these women would not be dishonored with any sexual things like that. You guys see the pattern here? Low-class women get passed around by men. High-class women with honor do not have all manner of men come in and flopping around between their legs, and the honorable men in a society recognize this too, even in the Viking Age. We actually have a couple records of high-class women fighting back so as not to have their honor tarnished. This happened too. They didn't just lay there and accept it. In the Skylitzes Chronicle, it tells the story of a Rus Viking actually forcing himself on a noble Thracian woman in the east. The woman fought back, and she killed the Rus Viking who was trying to assault her. And his comrades, instead of being upset that she killed their friend, the fellow Rus Viking, they actually praised her and gave her his possessions. So these men recognized that she had every right to defend herself, and their friend was in the wrong. In Króka-Refs saga, a noblewoman resisted an attacker by starting to wrestle him. So high-class women who fought back and didn't let themselves be used were definitely praised and respected even by enemy forces, and there would be no honor won for a man forcing himself upon a high-class woman. There was one exception though, and it's gonna sound pretty messed up, but this is the way scholars have phrased it. Women depicted in the sources of having masculine traits and behavior. Sometimes the men had to force themselves upon them as a way of putting them in their place. Again, not my words, I don't agree with it. But not only was there no shame on a man in doing this to a high-class woman, but he was actually praised in some of the sources. One example is in Haralds saga. It's a skaldic poem in the saga. A chieftain's two daughters, known to be quite rowdy and unladylike, they were making fun of the king's fleet, and later on they were taken and had sex forced upon them unwillingly, as the tale says. And this is a skaldic poem again, so remember, so a poem celebrating these acts, the prideful celebration of history. Another, in Knytlinga saga, the noble-born woman Bothildur did some things to insult and dishonor the king of Denmark at the time, King Eirik, and then he came around and abducted her eventually, and Bothildur stated that their relationship was started. I think they even got married, but it came about against her will, and the king had more intercourse with her out of hate than love. Another in Rolf's saga, Queen Óláfs from Saxland, so the Saxony, Germany area. She was an arrogant maiden assuming the role of a warrior king. King Helgi liked her, actually. He was from Denmark, and he decides that he wants to marry her. So he comes down and he visits, and Queen Olof is very rude and gets him drunk and cuts off Helgi's hair and his beard, a symbol of the male prowess, completely humiliating him. And the queen was all proud of herself and made fun, and she sent him away until Helgi got the opportunity one day to get back at her. And at that time, she turned into an innocent princess, all of a sudden apologizing, saying, "Oh, I will make it all up to you now, you can marry me, you can marry me." He said, "No, that's not an option for you anymore, but for my honor's sake, I am not in the mood to pay you back lightly, as badly as I was treated and mocked." And from that day on, the warrior maiden stuff stopped with Queen Olav, and she assumed her feminine gender roles. Pretty messed up. It's not right, but that was the harsh reality of the time. Any woman who fancied herself a badass warrior, men in these stories actually gained some honor, and they were celebrated for putting her in her place as it was described. Guys, this is another reason out of the 100-something reasons that I don't believe in the shield maiden thing. Do you have any idea what grim fate would await a woman if she was on the losing side of the battle and she assumed this warrior role? Do you have any idea what the men would do to her? That's not exactly something any woman would sign up for. So those are a few of the only examples of a noble woman, or royalty even, being used sexually, and the man was actually praised for it. It's not right, just saying that's history. But that's about all I have for you guys today. What do you think? Was it what you expected? Was it better or worse than the tales and the worst things you heard about it? Any things that you learned we should keep in the past? Or any wisdom from these old ways and philosophies that might benefit us today? So if that's all I have to say for today, let us all know. Vi ses nästa gång.